Hey everyone, welcome. Thank you for joining today's session. I'm Chris Payne, Senior Events Manager here at Pavilion. And today we have our panel here that will be discussing everything revenue leaders need to know about third-party SaaS buyers. And today joining us is Dave Campbell, CEO and co-founder of Tropic, as well as Elliot Comite, VP of Finance at Perchwell. And today this session is sponsored by Tropic, where they work with clients as strategic procurement partners to help them identify the best tool for the best value to help them achieve their strategic business objectives. Also, feel free to drop any questions you may have in the chat along the way, or to ask a question feature at the bottom of your screen, and the speakers will get to them throughout the session. All right, I'm going to turn it over to you, Dave, to kick us off.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having us. Huge thanks to Pavilion and the community. Everybody who's here, awesome to see you all. It's really cool seeing all the different locations flying in on the chat. We want this to be casual. We want it to be fun. We want it to be informative. You heard the topic on third-party buying. My company, Tropic, does this. It's a rising category, and we wanted to demystify the space a little bit and talk to people from the sales side about the work that we do. Quick, by way of introduction, I come from the sales side, grew up in sales as a CEO. I'm still doing sales all the time. And I've sold, $10,000 contracts to startups. I've sold $100,000 contracts to mid-market. I've sold $100 million contracts at Microsoft. And I've learned that the process for buying software in particular is really, really challenging at just about every level. And that was kind of the impetus for me to jump ship from that endeavor and start Tropic as employee number one. So I'm really excited to be here with Elliot. Thanks so much for joining us, Elliot, and agreeing to do some Tropic stuff with us. So, before I hand it to you, Elliot, just so everybody knows, I booked my own hotel in San Francisco, mistakenly booked it in the Tenderloin at a hotel where the Wi-Fi cuts out every couple minutes. So we might have to guerrilla style this webinar a little bit. If I suddenly disappear, I'll be back very quickly on my phone. And it's all totally planned, and it's all part of the show. So, Elliot, why don't you tell the group a little bit about yourself? Where you came from, what you're up to.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave, and awesome to be here with the group, and love seeing the chat buzzing. So if that keeps on rolling, that'll be a great session. Like Dave mentioned, I'm currently VP Finance at Perchwell. Before Perchwell, I spent about 3.5 years building out the finance team at Ironclad, which is a Bay Area workflow software and data company. I joined Ironclad at about 60 employees after the Series B, was there through the Series E, so north of 500, raised a bunch of rounds, the Series C, D, and E with the CEO of Ironclad. And before that, I was a growth stage investor at a VC firm in New York. Relative to go-to-market folks, I've always loved and collaborated super closely with the sales team. They were my favorite team at Ironclad. I did everything from kind of deal support in all of the in-flight negotiations with them towards areas on quotas and setting targets and everything to that end, and spent a ton of time working with them, in addition to having a brother who is a sales manager. So I feel like I like getting inside of the mind of go-to-market folks. Before we even hop into it, shameless plug for Perchwell, a company that I joined about 2 months ago. Perchwell is a workflow software and data business for residential real estate. We are about 50 folks after our Series A, which was raised about 9 months ago, led by Founders Fund. We are currently hiring founding people in marketing and sales, in addition to folks in customer success. So if anybody here wants to get back to the fun sausage making building stage, and also are based in kind of the New York area, and you like what you hear from me and think you might like working with me on this chat, please feel free to let me know. I'd love to chat. My email is just Elliot, first name @perchwell.com, and can talk whenever. And so just wanted to shameless plug that before Dave and I dive into it.
Yeah, like I dropped in the chat, great opportunity, guys. And I think that's probably a good pivot point into some of the discussion. So before we talk exclusively about, this category and how you and I met, Elliot, maybe we could talk a little bit, like we were just before everybody joined, about the transitions that you've seen. Somebody in the finance category at Ironclad, you started in kind of the pirate ship days, right? And I'm sure that there was one way of buying things and, buying software as a company at that stage versus what it ultimately evolved into. Could you maybe give the, sales folks here an understanding of how people like you bought at those stages, and then how we kind of came to know each other?
Yeah, absolutely. So like Dave mentioned, kind of very much joined in the pirate ship phase. From the finance side, there is usually a world of where outsourced accountants are kind of, running the show. And at a certain point in time, usually around the series A, B-ish, they bring in early folks on the finance side. And so you end up trying to figure out A, what's going on, B, are we routing and getting money to where it needs to go? And then 3, are we supporting our teams, sales, marketing, design, eng? And so, we had a little bit of leg up. Ironclad's a contracting business. So Ironclad builds software for contracts. And so we had a lot of core areas flowing through Ironclad, but at the same time, we didn't have a certain level of visibility or adult supervision in terms of what we were buying. Was it the right things to be buying, and we were spending the most money on it, or the right amount of money on it? I think as it relates to myself and Tropic and getting to know Dave, the big aha moment for me, like I think many people, actually ended up being in COVID. So before COVID, most of the contracting that I would spend a lot of time on was actually go to market. It was sales side. We had a rep trying to close a new business opportunity. And in the pirate ship days, we were trying to figure out, should we be granting deferred payment terms or quarterly invoicing or something that was revenue generating in order to drive business. COVID changed all of that, where we not only had our new business contracting, we had existing folks coming in where existing customers with the world on fire wanted to get pretty steep discounts related towards the renewals that were upcoming. And then at the same time, we realized there was this unique opportunity in time to go towards our vendors as people were coming to us and just trying to renegotiate and see how much money we could save, given that there was mass amounts of uncertainty in the world. So I ended up partnering with 15 different folks at Ironclad, speaking to all the different vendors, everybody from kind of Marketo on the marketing side, Figma on the design side, Datadog, Salesforce, Amplitude, all of the B2B SaaS vendors. And in that process, I partnered with all the folks who actually were points of contacts for those contracts. So our director of demand gen marketing, our VP, whoever was head of design. And I went through a lot of those processes, and we kind of very intentionally knew that we wanted to save money like a lot of other people did. And what I realized in kind of going through that process was that most people inside of the organization are actually not good at buying SaaS. They're optimizing for speed. They're uncomfortable. They don't like negotiating. I know for a lot of the folks here from Pavilion, it's probably a little bit of a strange aspect, considering most people on the sales side are very comfortable negotiating. But I kind of went through that process of talking to all of our vendors in COVID and realized that a lot of the points of contact at Ironclad, which I think is a very well-run company with a lot of talented folks, simply didn't have the means or the wherewithal to actually negotiate and be judicious with company dollars, through these buying cycles. So through that, and I think this is now flashing forward a little bit to about February and March of 21. So about a year later, ended up getting in touch. Dave, I forget how you got in touch with me, but we also were talking with Vendor at the time, which is a competitor of Tropic, and kind of looked at them side by side and realized that there was this pretty unique opportunity to not only scale me, what I was doing, kind of leading finance at the time, but also take a lot of the uncomfortable areas off of the hands of the folks who are running design and sales ops and et cetera at Ironclad that might not have been the most equipped to be more judicious with company capital and couldn't figure out the right way to negotiate and kind of get leverage off of our contracting situations.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone on the call here has ever had to sales pitch somebody that comes from the investor world, but it is super intense. That was, I think I was pretty sharp because I think I was fundraising at the time. And with the exception of today, we're not fundraising, but ordinarily when I have a mustache, it means that we're fundraising. It's kind of like a superstition of mine. And I got on the phone with Elliot and didn't realize fully what his background was. And you put me through the ringer, man. We were talking gross margin. We were talking about the TAM. We were talking about international expansion, product roadmap. That was probably the most intense sales experience that I had at that point.
Well, unlike some of the folks at Ironclad are very good at negotiating sales contracts, I feel pretty comfortable in it, luckily. And I have one rule about vendors who I work with, which is that I have to understand and be comfortable how they make money, because if I don't know how they make money, I find it hard to believe that we're going to be a long-term business partner. So put you to the ringer, but you pass with flying colors.
Thank you. Yeah, I've stolen that strategy since. It makes a lot of sense. So we're going to talk a little bit about the thesis behind my company, Tropic, and this category of third-party purchasing platforms and how salespeople can engage with us and get value from us and so on. But before I do that, I wanted to just start with a light poll to see kind of what the level of experience with companies like mine is for the folks who are here in the call. So if you click to polls at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a poll question there. So why don't we take a minute, if you could go into the poll question. The first question is, I've worked with a third-party SaaS buyer at least once, true or false? Please go ahead and vote there, and let's just kind of tally that up. Then we have one more question that's a little bit more fun, and we'll jump into the meat of the content today. Oh, this is fun. You can actually watch the animations in real time. I've never used Crowdcast before. I'm like just slowly but surely realizing what features it has. All right, I think we're going to let this go until my time. We'll say 11:14, so we don't drag it out too much. Wish we had hold music. That would be good.
You can get hold music from looking outside of the window in the Tenderloin.
Yeah, very true. Very true. Yeah, I had some great hold music at like 3 this morning. Yeah, it was nice. Okay, I think we'll call it. Let's move to, it looks like some folks have some experience here. Let's move to the second question. Do we believe that third-party buyers are glorified negotiators trying to lowball us on price? Kind of a loaded question, but I thought it would be fun. No answers. Oh, nice.
We call this one a leading question.
Yeah, this is very, very much a leading question. Unabashedly a leading question. Oh, good. We got a lot of falses. I guess these are the folks who must have engaged with Tropic. We'll give this one more minute. Okay, cool. Thanks for participating. So why did I ask these questions? Obviously, I think just good to get context on kind of what level of experience folks on the sales side have working with third-party buying platforms. I think that this concept is a relatively new thing, but it's definitely garnering a lot of traction recently. And I think that when it goes poorly, the perception is that, here's like a hardcore negotiation service that's here to lowball on price. I can assure everybody on the phone call, coming from the sales side, that's by no means my intention with this company, nor is it our approach here at Tropic. To just kind of shed some light on the category and kind of what I was thinking. When I first started out, it was at a marketing technology company, and we were selling to other startups. And as a sales rep selling to other startups, we were selling directly to the economic buyer usually, and transactions were, pretty seamless, pretty fast, relatively little back and forth. But in a lot of cases, there wasn't total alignment between what the person thought they were buying and what we were selling. And I thought that was interesting because it's really hard as a buyer to really get a good understanding of all the technology that's out there, because there's 10,000 SaaS vendors, and there's probably 5 more raising a Series A right now in Silicon Valley, right? So that was kind of one thing I thought was interesting. And then we started to move up market a little bit, and we started to engage with procurement teams. And it was my first experience ever dealing with procurement teams. And this is when I was like, wow, this is like a totally broken business function, because we had relatively complex cloud software, and we had folks on the marketing team that wanted to buy the software, didn't fully understand it, would kick it over the fence to a procurement team, and the procurement team would basically come to the call and say, we need a better price, with zero understanding of what the technology was. And it was like, procurement for us became a place where deals would just go to die. We would try to circumvent procurement at all costs, because it was, we would be negotiating on things that made literally no sense for what the technology actually did. And that was very interesting to me. And I started to kind of dig into procurement as a category. And, finance teams quite often are acting as procurement, even if it's not called procurement. And, what's interesting about procurement and until recently, I think finance is that these companies and the folks that would take these roles historically were never really designed or trained in buying SaaS. SaaS was not a category that necessitated procurement for companies for a very long time. We were selling to retailers when I was at this marketing technology company, and their procurement team was there to buy buttons and cotton and zippers and things like that. And they would hire people into procurement that had relationships with people in those categories. And then one day they'd say, by the way, you need to buy our software too, right? So it was just totally, deals would slip. We would have these great close plans that we worked out with our stakeholders. They would just get thrown out the window, and everything would kind of fall apart with procurement. And what I realized was that there's a big opportunity here to create a company that leverages the same types of efficiencies that salespeople are using for buying, and it would actually streamline this process for the whole team. So, or for both sides, I mean. So what does that mean? On the sales side, and first I was an individual contributor, then I was a VP at this company. We would have the opportunity to sell that product 100 times per year, right? So we would learn everything about selling the product. We would understand where the sticking points would be. We could refine, a very, well-oiled process for how we went about selling it. And the folks that were buying it would buy it once every year, once every 2 years, once every 3 years, and they had no chance to really build that muscle. So it was very hard for us to complete deals. So I thought, what if we could, create a team that was just as efficient at buying as the sales teams are at selling? There's savings might be one outcome, but that's an outcome the finance team is looking for anyway. Timing could be better. We could close deals faster. We could close deals more seamlessly, and we could start to build relationships with the sales reps so that we have experience buying and selling to each other across multiple companies. So that was kind of the impetus behind Tropic. Sales pitch over. I'd love to talk more about the rise of procurement tech in the market today. So we had this idea 2019. We raised some money. There are other companies out there doing similar stuff, although I believe that our approach is differentiated. There's no doubt that this is kind of something that's on the rise. What do you think of this category from sitting on the other side of the table now that you've seen it through a couple different lenses, Elliot?
So personally, as someone kind of an operating finance professional, but also having a VC hat for a number of years, and also having worked at Ironclad or having scaled Ironclad for nearly 3.5, which is also a back office software company. I think this category, at least from a high level, makes a lot of sense that it should exist. If you think about software and the way it's evolved over time, obviously with Salesforce being the gold standard, it makes sense that software started on the application side with a lot of the revenue generated functions. Salesforce in SaaS, obviously there's expanded to Service Cloud, but also marketing, all the early marketing iterations. If you believe that software is going to be more important, not less important over time, I think I would also believe that software will penetrate all of the certain key functions that exist inside of a company, of which kind of back office from finance, legal, procurement, IT all exist. And so from a super high level, it makes sense to me this should exist. A thing that David brought up that was kind of a little bit of an aha moment, and this came out when I grilled him for about an hour and we were considering buying, was that my sense is about 10% of any organization at any point in time is comfortable driving a negotiating process. So you can get them in front of a vendor, they can understand their pricing levers, and let's say they're negotiating with let's say Amplitude, they can understand Amplitude's pricing, the value you drive into an organization, and then help price that out on the right way, about 10%. Even that person inside of your organization who's really strategic, knows how to drive a negotiation, knows how to project manage, and knows how to get match the right price to value and not just accept what the sales rep is telling them they need. Even that person is negotiating with Amplitude once every 2 years. And so the aha moment for me with someone like Tropic and Dave is even that person, a really strategic person who happens to exist in a leadership role in product management, who's negotiating on product analytics with Amplitude, that person is never going to be as good at negotiating with Amplitude as someone from David's team is. And so when I think about this category in terms of on the procurement side and how it should evolve, for me, it logically makes sense that there's somebody who is going to have iterative conversations and might negotiate with Amplitude maybe 20 times in a year, and that person is going to be better at it than a person in my organization that's negotiating them once every 2 years at max. So from like a high level market structure, I think software, I mean, we all probably work in technology and software. I'm biased that software would be more important, but on an individual micro level, it also made sense to me that something like this probably should exist.
Yeah, and I'd love to talk about, I think where some of the potential benefit lies for the sales side of things. I think that a good example, I think it was a NetSuite deal that we worked on together at a certain point in time, if I'm not mistaken. And I can't even, coming from the sales side, I can't even say how many deals just collapse at the end because of, inaction or the close plan falling apart. And one of the things that we can drive and, third-party buyers in general can drive is efficiency and achieving the outcome of the contract, which is going to drive a business outcome for the company. Was I right? Was it NetSuite, or am I remembering the wrong thing?
Yeah, it was NetSuite. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Could you break down how that went down?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in taking a step back, and this is something that like I've certainly learned and seeing and working inside of operating organizations, is that people, especially our friends on the sales team, tend to think of finance like the Grinch. It's like kind of a little bit like a wall of no. Often I come to finance, they tell me no. Internal finance team says no. External finance team says no. Like, what's up with finance people? Why are they always saying no? I think like there are definitely certain flavors of folks on the finance side who are like that. My experience, at least with, folks on the finance side who are additive, who are business builders, is they generally love working in their roles and they want to help drive certain pockets of the business forward. And so they generally don't want to be a wall of no, and they want to be enabling people in order to kind of drive great outcomes that they want. And so when I think about areas that I care about as someone kind of leading finance functions, I don't care about, having someone just say no all the time. I care about the concept of adult supervision, which is what I think a company like Tropic does a really good job in building to internal operations. And so, as David mentioned, we were going out on our own team to actually buy NetSuite. We were transitioning from a more SMB kind of ERP up to NetSuite as Ironclad was scaling through the years. We engaged Tropic as we were already, customers to help us with parts of that journey. Similar to what kind of was talking about in terms of Tropic having done many, many NetSuite negotiations, and we, at least the folks on my team, had done one like 3 or 4 years ago. The market changed, the business had changed, the way NetSuite kind of acted had all changed. And we were getting into the parts of the negotiation, we were looking for a really consultative aspect of the process of like, hey, Dave and Tropic team, like, when should we buy NetSuite? How should we position ourselves? What are the right levers to push on to get us a good deal? And how do we drive this towards a close? And the value that we got through that experience was incredible. The insights that Tropic were able to drum up were things of, hey, you should probably position to close this in November because NetSuite's fiscal end happens to be in November. I have no idea whether fiscal end is in November, but it is true. And so generally, as whoever on the sales side knows, if you're January end of year and someone is driving a negotiation with you in like the second week of January, you're probably going to get a better price for that sort of deal. So that was one. The second that Dave's team was able to drum up was, hey, we were actually at the time in between both NetSuite and Sage Intacct. Dave's team was like, look, you actually want a stalking horse for this negotiation, but you want it to be Workday, which had come out. Core was like HR technology, but they had developed this competing ERP geared at a finance function. You actually want Workday to be a stalking horse because there's a lot of competitive stuff in the market right now between NetSuite and Workday. We wouldn't have known that. We would have just said we're between Sage and NetSuite. And if the NetSuite rep had understood that probably would have been different outcomes. So that was very interesting, helping us think through competitive positioning. The third piece here that was also interesting was that we knew that we had a pretty limited finance and accounting team at the time. The business was larger than the staffing and the headcount requirements on that team. And so we knew we weren't going to have a bandwidth as a team to like successfully deploy. And there's one thing you definitely want to deploy right is you want to deploy your ERP right. So we knew we were going to go ahead and build and buy services in order to get this installed, get this in the company set up in the right way. Dave and the Tropic team had like this very interesting insight, which is that you're not supposed to tell NetSuite that you are going to go with a services shop. So before I go there, there's 2 types of services shop with NetSuite. One of them is their in-house services shop, and the second is there's external partners. The external partners tend to be way more sophisticated than the internal shop. Like many other software companies, they have a way larger ecosystem than like a professional services team internally. Building off of that, what Dave and his team also told us was that NetSuite is not going to connect you to any of their premier shops until they flash you a quote. And so the way we had all these interesting balls in the air of the negotiation, where we had to time it right, we had to position it right way competitively, we had very limited bandwidth, and we also needed to drive the negotiation to flash a quote to get things from the right vendor. None of those we would have known on ourselves. Just like it would never have happened, even as intentional and as dedicated as we wanted to be to this negotiation, that just never would have happened. Those 4 insights were incredibly valuable towards us and helped drive and kind of ultimately make a successful purchase and a successful implementation.
Yeah, thanks for breaking that down, Elliot. And I think that this is a good kind of dovetail into the next section, which is, how to think about working with companies like us. So we were able to deliver, sounds like a good business outcome on the NetSuite deal by having bought NetSuite so many times. At the same time, we've worked with, NetSuite reps so many times that we understand what's relevant and salient for them, right? So there's a timeline that they need to hit. If there's an end of quarter deadline, that's commission that they want, that's revenue that they want to recognize within that quarter. And we know that it's going to help drive the outcome for the buyer. So we can create a situation that's more or less a win-win. So how to work with us and what's the best way to get set up for success on the sales side. One thing is, know that we want to drive good outcomes for you on the sales side, because one of the things that has really differentiated us, I think, in the market is that we have great relationships with the suppliers that we work with. And we tend to find reps that we work with again and again and kind of tag team contracts to ensure that we're driving efficient outcomes for both parties. So the first thing is just to kind of get a good understanding of what's relevant to both parties in the deal. We at Tropic are, in essence, agents of the finance teams that we work with, and we're driving the goals that those finance teams want to accomplish, right? So sometimes those are savings goals, sometimes they're goals around payment terms, sometimes they're goals around contract duration that are not specific to any single supplier, that are specific to the entire organization. So if we understand, from the sales side, what's really important to you guys in this transaction? Is it important to land it in a certain time frame? Is it important to include certain strategic products, things like that? We can work together in a very upfront manner to figure out what's going to be an equitable outcome. And one thing that I think is also good for the sales side to know is that we have much better knowledge of the products that you offer probably and the things that are out there and what the potential upgrades are that are going to happen over time than somebody that's never bought your technology before. So we can, be allies in that sense. That's number one, is kind of get aligned on, what are the outcomes that are relevant for the customer and what are the outcomes that are relevant for you guys on the sales team. And the more direct we can be, the better the outcome that we can accomplish. And then the other thing is just maintain touch with us. I have still from the early days at Tropic relationships with a handful of strategic account executives from suppliers that we worked with. And, we then become an avenue for them to tell us when things are happening, like a new product is coming out that our customers should be aware of. There's updates being made that our customers should be aware of, changes in pricing, things like that. The more equipped we are with that information, the better we can propagate that information across our customer base. And when we find a tool that our customers really, really love, and we have a really good experience, dealing with the sales team with that tool, that means that, quite often we're called upon to do sourcing, where the customer will come to us and say, hey, we have a need in the product analytics space. What have you guys seen? What are your customers buying? And we can be a bridge to say, hey, these guys have always been great to work with and they have a really good product. We can connect you to their sales rep. So the more we work together, I think the better in the long term for both sides of the equation. Those are, from a high level, I think, how to think about working with us. Were you going to say something and I cut you off, Elliot, or no?
I know, I agree with you. I mean, I would even pull the curtain back a little more and say to all the revenue generating folks here, why do deals slip? Sometimes sometimes deals that are in forecast or deals that are in commit were never sold in the first place. Hopefully those never hit commit, but sometimes they're never sold in the first place. Sometimes you have a disruption of business, which we've seen more often. We've seen happen obviously over the last 2+ years. Sometimes, things just happen and come up, but usually deals slip because the internal buyer has too much stuff going on. They just like, they can't juggle all their priorities, and they know they need to get this done, but they get it done now or they get it done 4 weeks from now. For them, it's just like they have too many things on their plate. If I was a salesperson and I saw Tropic on the other end, I would get really excited. And the reason I'd get really excited is I know that there is like a very strategic, dedicated project manager whose job it is to make sure that deal closes in the period that they want it to close. And so if I connect that towards, why deals slip, a Tropic person involved signifies like pretty strong intent that there's willingness to buy. Of course, you are going to have to give up a little bit on price, maybe on terms, maybe on duration. But if I'm building a book of business for a quarter, and again, trying to get in the mind of a sales rep, I would definitely, and if I have a 75K ACV list priced out, I would take that as a 60 or 65K booking over any day, over not knowing if it's going to close in the last day of the quarter. And so I think about Tropic as being both allies to folks on the finance side, myself, but also really great allies if you're selling the deal, because that if you do your job right, you're probably going to close that deal.
Yeah, definitely. We want the deal to close. And what I've told people in the past too is they're going to have to, they'll have to come deal with you anyway, Elliot, right? If we're not involved at the end of the day, they're going to have to get through the finance organization. The outcome is likely going to be the same, but we can get you there with no friction, and we can commit to getting things done for you in a period of time. And we can commit to giving you updates throughout. One of the things that drove me the craziest when I was on the sales side is not having any idea what's going on with my deal, and having radio silence from, the person that I'm selling to. So we can be your liaison and ensure that you're getting those updates. So I think it's, one, an upfront conversation about what you're really looking to accomplish in the deal, help us understand what's going to make a win for you. Two is committing to a close plan against that. And then I think the last piece is maintaining touch with us over the course of conducting business, building a relationship with us so that we can do more business across other accounts. And, where appropriate, if, again, we're a completely unbiased company in this sense, but if you have a good tool and we've had a good relationship with you, we want you to succeed. And we definitely want to get you more exposure across the customers that we have. So, as anticipated, the bulk of the content is done about halfway into the allotted time, which I always love in a webinar.
David, one more plug before we open it up is that, like you mentioned, without knowing where your deals are in flight, Tropic is amazing for that, because we're on Shameless Plugs. My former employer, Ironclad, is also great for knowing where deals are in flight. And both of those are fantastic tools to help you as folks in the go-to-market and sales side understand the way things are trending and if your deal is going to go ahead and close. I had to throw a shameless plug in for my former employer, which I think they built a great product too.
Yeah, by all means. Ironclad's awesome tool. So wanted to hear from you guys. Gave you the high level. We're a totally open book. If you have any questions, you can either use the ask a question button, or if it's easier, you can just drop them into the poll. Cue the hold music.
Don't be shy. I hope we weren't too boring.
Yeah, I know. That's my biggest fear in life, is to be boring. That's I forget what my wife and I were talking about, but she was like, yeah, you're like a normal adult. And that to me was like an insult that cut very deeply. So rather be anything than boring. I think we'll give it another minute. Also, this will be circulated, so you have access to this after the fact. If here we go. How do you multi-thread without alienating your champion? Great question. So, Mark, could you clarify that a little bit? So the situation is you're selling to a company. You have a champion. That champion is now either not mobilizing for you, or you just want to cast a wider net, and you expand through that organization with introductions to other people. Could you type yes if that's right and no if that's wrong? Correct. Okay. So I think that there's a couple ways of doing this. The first way is you could, tell that champion, hey, in my experience, to really be set up for success here, we're going to need to kind of get other people into the boat and make sure that everyone is aligned. Here are the people that I think we should get into the boat. And, I think that I ask you for an intro to those people, or with your permission, I'm going to reach out to them with you on CC. So that's one way of doing it. By the way, Tropic will help you with that. That's something that we would never prevent you from doing. The other thing that you can do, this worked really well for me on the sales side, is you can build kind of an org map that aligns with their org chart. So say that, me, sales rep, I'm aligned with you, champion. My boss is aligned with your boss. That person's boss is aligned with that other person's boss. And I think that for this to mobilize, the best thing to do is to have one-on-ones all the way up this chain. We do this quite often in sales at Tropic. We'll have a rep say like, our CEO wants to get aligned with your CEO. So he's going to be reaching out directly. And I will do that. And then I'll have a sit down with that CEO to get kind of better alignment in the account. I'm a big fan of bringing the champion along for the ride. If you want to get multi-threaded, rather than, shooting emails out in the dark if your champion is not mobilizing, because all that's going to do is alienate the one good relationship that you have in the account. So I just like to break down exactly why this is something that should happen. Sometimes it's, a rogue CEO that's doing it behind your back and reaching out to their CEO. If you feel like that might ruffle the feathers of your champion, but those are some strategies that I've seen work effectively. And if you're working on a deal with Tropic, you can ask us and we can, get those people mobilized and get them into the conversation for you. Great question. Anybody else? I'm going to let the next minute tick by on my clock, and then I think maybe we'll call it a day then.
There's one question. What innovations do you bring for business casework? What KPIs do you find interesting for tracking SaaS value?
Got it. I always need a clarifying question. When you say business casework, could you elaborate on what that means potentially in the chat, Sean? I can definitely say what KPIs are interesting for tracking SaaS value for sure. So one thing is utilization of the SaaS. Are we actually getting the value out of the platforms that we purchased? Like, because our thing at Tropic is get value. You want to maximize value. It's not about minimizing price or maximizing features. It's about maximizing value, right? And to maximize value, you want to ensure that your platforms are being utilized. If you're on the sales side, you want to make sure of that as well, obviously. And if you are an account management handling account that's already bought a piece of technology, if they're not using your technology, they're not getting value, and they're probably not going to retain, right? So utilization is one really great way of analyzing it. Two is kind of getting CSAT from the base of users that are using the platform. You can do this with a very basic, Google poll. Hey, are you happy with this tool? Are you using it? I wouldn't be surprised, Elliot, if when we were coming up for renewal with you guys, if you did something similar internally to see if people were getting value out of us. Like, that's a great way of doing it. And then if it is an ROI generating platform that's either cutting cost or driving revenue, then you have a tangible set of business metrics to look at. So is it getting used? Are the people that are using liking it? And is it either improving our top line or our bottom line? Those, I think, are kind of the easiest ways of thinking about it. Thanks for clarifying the first half of that question, Sean. So the business case for the client, it depends if this is through the lens of what we do at Tropic. My belief always in constructing an effective business case is that you're connecting that business case to a problem that the company is facing that's big enough to be talked about in board meetings. So what are they talking about in the board meeting? They're talking about extending runway right now. They're talking about rationalizing technology right now. If you're a seller trying to sell into a company that is focused on cash flow right now, then you should know these are the things they're talking about at the board level, and you should present a business case that's going to move the needle on one of those big KPIs. That's how I always think about it, right? So those are the things that we can present a business case very aligned with that currently. And the other thing that I think for us, at least, a lot of companies are really focused on is compliance. Like, it's not even necessarily, if you look at LinkedIn and you see all the layoffs and things that have been happening in the last couple of months, like anytime the market gets spooked, I think you're going to see that stuff for a little while, and then you're kind of going to stop seeing it. And I see you nodding your head, Elliot. There's going to be a wave of cuts or not that happens. And then I think the market kind of goes back to doing what it does. And it really becomes a question of how do we prevent overspend from happening in the first place? And for us, that's a business case around compliance. Like, make sure that you have a process for this. Did you want to add to that when we were talking about the market there? I saw you like smirk a little.
I don't know how many people here are in like the process of like quota setting, if there's any like VP of sales that have like, you know, a voice in that process, or CROs or stuff like that. But I always like call it like the yin yang whipsaw of company building, that if you think about like power of an organization that has like these natural checks and balances in like go times, that power tends to like go pretty far on the seesaw towards revenue generating people, of like, how many dollars can we stuff in the machine in this period? And then market gets spooked, like David mentioned, that like seesaw kind of flows back to, you know, you get more power on the finance side of like, hey, we need to do X, Y, Z, and ABC on the cash flow. And so understanding like that power dimensions inside of organizations, which I think anybody who is, you know, leading functions through COVID and now through the current kind of market correction or whatever you want to call it, can feel that. And like that's kind of psychology that David you know, pronounced 100% flows up into boardrooms everywhere. And so if you can align with that, it's a good way to sell value.
Yep. Yeah. Business case, anchor at the board level, always for me. Far more powerful than selling features. Then we had a question from Michael. How does Tropic handle suppliers that they haven't seen before? So in our experience, there's a finite number of types of contract and a finite number of ways to license software, right? There's software that's licensed by seat. There's software that's licensed by spend. There's software that's licensed by consumption. You know, there's a handful of different ways of licensing software. It's, you know, I haven't seen a wildly different way of licensing software in recent history. So it's pretty easy, I think, if you work in contracts all the time, to kind of understand how a contract works and figure out if it's going to be, you know, generating the value that it should. The question mark for us, if it's a supplier that we've never seen before, is whether the product has the value that it espouses. And that's a harder question to answer if it's one that none of our customers have ever worked with. So generally what we do is we pull a network. We have a number of folks in, you know, finance, operations, and procurement, even at companies that we don't work with, that we can go to and solicit guidance and feedback. But we also really rely on you, the sales rep, you know, to take us through what it is that makes the product special and what the value is that it's intended to derive. So, you know, there's a little bit of, you know, familiarity when it comes to how it's licensed. The lack of familiarity comes with what it does. And we very much want to be educated in that, because again, it's not just about price, nor is it just about features. It's about the balance. Like, is this, you know, it's worth buying. Sometimes it's worth buying a Ferrari if it's something that you need a Ferrari for, right? So the more that we can understand that, the better. Anybody else? Going twice. Well, if we're not connected on LinkedIn, I talk about this stuff all the time on LinkedIn. I'm probably a little too active on LinkedIn and borderline annoying, but please connect and follow me, and you can, you know, continue the dialogue there if you'd like to. If you want to know more about my company, you can email me, or you can email how does Tropic make money? Good question, Sean. So we get paid on a flat SaaS fee, and that SaaS fee is dictated by spend that's being managed. The reason that's important, I think, for the sales side is that, you know, there's precedent for like third-party procurement solutions. And when I was at Microsoft as a global business manager there, the companies that we were selling to would bring in these like giant bloated consulting firms like ISG or even like Gartner, and they would give them these like disgusting PowerPoint decks of like how to buy Microsoft. And all they were motivated on, the only thing they were motivated on was savings. And that was reflected in their business model. They got paid based on the amount of money that they would save. So they would say, you know, we're going to basically grind all of these contracts and we're going to take 20% of what it is that we save. And that's not what we do at Tropic, because we think that that warps the incentive structure. It means that we're then incentivized to save money no matter what, even if it's not good for the business. and we're incentivized to take credit for savings that we may not have even actually driven. And that really, hurts the buyer and also hurts the seller by just raking the deals over the coals. So the way that we get paid at Tropic is a fixed fee.
When did the model evolve?
So early on, we tested variable percent of savings, spend-based plus savings, and then spend plus spend only. And I think it evolved into spend plus spend only a year ago. So what that means is saving more means it doesn't mean that we get paid anymore. The only way that we get paid at Tropic is you commit to having us work on a certain amount of spend. And if we do a good job and you want to give us more spend, you have to pay us more money.
Interesting.
Yeah.
For the record, I bought Tropic when it was a percentage, they'll keep a percentage of what they save. I kind of like that because I thought it was elegant to use money to find money. But I understand the incentive piece as well.
We also still have the performance guarantee. So we still have to put our
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
But we don't. My point is, we're not incentivized to save for no reason. We're not incentivized to push and push and push and push
Cool.
and get to a level where we're getting paid more for dismantling a deal. We're more incentivized to drive the compliant outcomes that you guys are looking for, which was a business decision that we made, specifically actually for the buyer, because we would find ourselves, just as those big consulting firms did, in situations where it's like, removing a product from this contract will save money, but it's going to cost the company value to do that, right? And they actually need this entire platform. So that's why we have the model that we do.
Final plug for myself at Perchwell. If you or any of your friends are looking to be in the 45, 50 person scrappy early founding go-to-market team days, we're starting to think about folks in marketing, sales, and have a CS team, but always looking for great people. My email is Elliot, first name @perchwell.com. And please feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn or email or anything of the sort. Preference for yourself or any friends based in New York City.
Yep. And same for me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. Shoot me an email. I'm a pretty reachable CEO as far as these things go. And I hope you guys got value out of this. If you want to rap more about this stuff, by all means, just let me know. We'll circulate this if you want to watch it later or share it with somebody. So thanks so much for your time and your good questions, everybody.